My name is Paxton, 32 years old, and I was preparing what I thought would be the perfect Christmas dinner. Turkey roasting in the oven, potatoes mashed to perfection, and hope bubbling in my chest that tonight might finally ease the tension between my mother and me. Little did I know, between the cranberry sauce and stuffing, she was preparing to deliver words that would shatter our already fragile relationship. Before I share this journey, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit that subscribe button, and stick around to discover how sometimes leaving is the greatest act of love. After graduating with my software engineering degree, I had big plans. Silicon Valley beckoned with promising opportunities. Apartment hunting websites filled my browser history, and my resume circulated among tech giants. Then came the call that changed everything. Dad had suffered a massive heart attack. By the time I reached the hospital, he was gone. Diana, my 58-year-old mother, collapsed emotionally. The woman who once radiated strength now seemed fragile, lost without her partner of 35 years. Her health, already compromised by diabetes and early arthritis, deteriorated rapidly in the weeks following the funeral. "I can manage," she insisted, wiping away tears when I suggested moving back home temporarily. But the empty pill bottles, unpaid bills, scattered across the kitchen counter, and her dramatic weight loss told a different story. After finding her sobbing on the bathroom floor one night, unable to remember if she had taken her medication, I made my decision. "Mom, I think I should stay here for a while," I told her over breakfast the next morning. "Just until you feel better," I added, thinking it might be a few months at most. 3 years later, I was still there. As an only child, the responsibility fell squarely on my shoulders. The modest ranch-style home in suburban Colorado, where I grew up, became my residence once again. I converted the basement into a makeshift office for my remote work as a programmer, taking calls while keeping an ear out for my mother upstairs. Financial reality set in quickly. Mom's meager teacher's pension barely covered her medications. Dad's life insurance helped initially, but eventually dwindled. I stepped in, covering the $2,000 monthly rent, utilities, groceries, and her healthcare costs not covered by insurance. "You don't have to do this," Mom would say occasionally during the first year, a genuine appreciation in her eyes. "I want to help," I would respond, and I meant it. Working as a software developer for a financial technology company provided me with a comfortable income, but supporting 2 adults stretched my budget thin. I picked up freelance coding jobs on weekends, sacrificing social life for extra cash. My girlfriend Eliza understood. A pediatric nurse with boundless compassion, she would visit after long hospital shifts, bringing homemade cookies and patience. She would sit with Mom, looking through old photo albums, while I caught up on work deadlines. "Your mother reminds me of my patients sometimes," Eliza confided one night as we sat on the front porch, scared, needing control over something when they feel powerless over everything else. Those words would prove prophetic. By the second year, subtle changes emerged in my mother's behavior. The grateful woman who once thanked me for helping around the house transformed into a critical observer of every move I made. Nothing was ever quite right: the groceries I purchased, the way I loaded the dishwasher, even the temperature I set the thermostat. "Your father would never have put the cereal boxes on that shelf," became a common refrain, delivered with a sigh that implied deeper disappointment than mere cabinet organization. Still, I rationalized her behavior. Grief manifests differently in everyone, and perhaps this was her way of keeping Dad's memory alive. I adjusted, adapted, and accommodated, believing things would eventually improve. They did not. By year 3, exhaustion had become my constant companion. Between full-time work, household maintenance, managing Mom's medical appointments, and trying to maintain some semblance of a relationship with Eliza, I existed in a perpetual state of depletion. "You look tired, Marcus," my closest friend since high school observed during one of our rare lunch meetups. "I'm fine," I lied, the same way I did whenever anyone expressed concern. But beneath the surface, resentment brewed not for the financial burden or even the caregiving responsibilities, but for the growing feeling that nothing I did would ever be enough. The first major sign of trouble came on an ordinary Tuesday. I had prepared lasagna, following my grandmother's recipe to the letter. It was one of Mom's favorites, a dish that normally brought comfort and happy memories. "The noodles are overcooked," Mom announced after one bite, pushing her plate away. and there's too much garlic. I swallowed my defensive response. I'll do better next time. But next time brought different criticisms. Too much salt, not enough oregano, too much cheese. The sauce was too watery. Every meal became an opportunity for critique, despite the fact that I had become the household's primary cook, shopper, and dishwasher. The kitchen, however, was just the beginning. You rearranged the living room furniture while I was at my doctor's appointment, she accused one afternoon, though I had only moved a side table 3 inches to better accommodate her walker. The vacuum cleaner is too loud. Can't you do that when I'm not trying to watch my shows? Why did you buy this brand of detergent? It makes my skin itch. Small complaints accumulated into a mountain of dissatisfaction. I began second-guessing every decision, walking on eggshells in what had once been my childhood home. Then came the Eliza situation. She helps herself to things in the kitchen without asking. Mom complained after my girlfriend had prepared dinner for all 3 of us. She sits in your father's chair. Her perfume gives me a headache. Does she have to laugh so loudly? Eliza, ever gracious, tried to adapt. She stopped wearing perfume altogether when visiting. She asked permission before using the kitchen. She sat only where directed, but nothing appeased my mother. She's trying to take over, Mom whispered dramatically when Eliza went to the bathroom. She wants to push me out of my own home. The irony that it was technically my home now, at least financially, went unspoken. The comparisons to my father began subtly, but grew increasingly pointed. Your dad always remembered to bring my tea exactly at 7, she would say. When I arrived with her evening beverage at 7:05, your father never left wet towels on the bathroom floor. This, despite my meticulous bathroom habits, your dad could fix the garage door in 10 minutes flat. This while watching me struggle with a repair for half an hour. Each comparison chipped away at my confidence, my patience, and ultimately, my compassion. When I gently tried explaining how these comments affected me, Mom's eyes would well with tears. I miss him so much, she would sob. You just don't understand what it's like to lose the love of your life. How could I argue with grief? I would retreat, swallowing my frustration, resolving to try harder. The situation escalated when relatives began calling. Aunt Laura's voice dripped with disappointment over the phone. Your mother says you've been short-tempered with her lately. She mentioned you're rarely home anymore. She's worried about how little you eat with her. My cousin Samantha, once my childhood playmate, now texted accusatory messages. Family takes care of family. Your mom needs you. I was baffled. I spent nearly every non-working hour at home. I prepared all our meals. I handled every household responsibility. Yet somehow, in my mother's retelling, I had become neglectful and distant. Mom, why are you telling people I'm not helping you? I finally confronted her after Thanksgiving, when Uncle Robert had pulled me aside to lecture me about stepping up. I never said that, she insisted, eyes wide with apparent innocence. They misunderstood, but the pattern continued. Neighbors who once greeted me warmly now offered tight smiles. Mrs. Jennifer from next door, who had brought casseroles after Dad died, now asked pointed questions about why my mother's garden looked neglected. Mr. Harold from across the street made comments about young people today, not understanding family obligation. The community I had grown up in, where I had once felt embraced and supported, was turning against me based on a narrative I couldn't counter without seeming defensive. This isn't fair, I confided to Eliza during one of our rare moments alone. I'm doing everything I can. I know, she said, squeezing my hand. But Paxton, this isn't sustainable. Something has to change. I nodded, but felt trapped. How could I abandon my mother when she clearly needed support? What kind of son would that make me? So I endured. I smiled through the criticisms. I defended myself gently to relatives. I continued paying bills, preparing meals, managing medications, driving to appointments, and maintaining the house, all while working full-time and trying to preserve my relationship with Eliza. But inside, resentment festered like an untreated wound. By the beginning of December, financial pressure intensified. My mother's arthritis medication doubled in price after an insurance policy change. The house needed a new water heater. My car required expensive repairs. My savings dwindled alarmingly. I need to take on some extra work, I informed Mom over dinner. A company in Seattle needs help with a 3-week project. The pay is excellent. Her fork clattered against her plate. So you'll be working even more hours? When will you have time for me? It's temporary, I explained. And mostly at night, after you're asleep. Your father would never have put money before family, she said, the familiar comparison cutting deep. Nevertheless, I accepted the project. Working until 2 or 3 in the morning became routine, my eyes burning from screen glare as I coded in the basement while the house slept. During daylight hours, I maintained my regular job and household responsibilities, existing on caffeine and determination. My absence during these night hours, though Mom was asleep, somehow became evidence of abandonment. You're never around anymore, she complained, though objectively nothing had changed in our daily interaction time. One night, I emerged from the basement at 3 in the morning, desperate for coffee. In the dark kitchen, my foot connected with something sharp. Switching on the light revealed my broken coffee mug on the floor, my favorite one, a gift from Eliza with our inside joke printed on it. Mom? I called out, confused. She appeared in the doorway in her bathrobe. Oh, that. I accidentally knocked it off the counter earlier. I was going to clean it up in the morning. But the mug had been in the dishwasher when I went downstairs. And it wasn't the only accident that followed. My external hard drive containing years of work found in the trash. I thought it was broken since it was just sitting there. My framed college diploma glass shattered. The hook must have been loose. My favorite sweater shrunk in the wash. I was just trying to help with laundry. Each incident followed by plausible deniability, but the pattern was unmistakable. Then came the medication strike. I returned from grocery shopping to find Mom's morning pills untouched in their dispenser. Did you forget your medication? I asked, concerned. You weren't here to remind me, she replied. What if I had fallen? What if I had needed help? You're always working, always with your girlfriend, never thinking about your poor mother. The unfairness of the accusation I had only been gone 90 minutes, had left a note, and had my phone with me, struck me speechless. Eliza suggested therapy for Mom, for me, for both of us together. When I gently proposed the idea, Mom reacted as though I had suggested committing her to an institution. Now you think I'm crazy? She wailed. After everything I've done for you? After raising you alone? Dad was there until 3 years ago, I corrected gently. So now you're calling me a liar? This is what I get for sacrificing everything for you. The conversation devolved from there, ending with her locked in her bedroom, while I sat on the stairs, head in hands, wondering how we had arrived at this point. The next day, I overheard her on the phone with Aunt Laura. He called me crazy. Suggested putting me in a home. After all I've done, barely gives me enough money for food. Each lie twisted in my gut like a knife. When confronted later, she denied the conversation entirely, despite my having heard it clearly. The community campaign against me intensified. Neighbors no longer made eye contact. Extended family sent judgmental text messages. Even people from Mom's church, who had never met me, somehow formed opinions about my character and dedication as a son. Mr. Harold from across the street approached me while I was shoveling snow from our driveway. Your mother tells me you're threatening to throw her out, he said, disapproval heavy in his voice. What? No, that's not. She says you withhold her medication when you're angry. The accusation was so absurd, so contrary to reality, that I couldn't formulate a response. She's an elderly woman who lost her husband, he continued. She needs support, not threats. As he walked away, I leaned on the shovel, physically shaking with anger and disbelief. My mother was 61, hardly elderly, and the only threats in our household were the emotional ones wielded against me. That night, Eliza held me as I finally broke down. I can't do this anymore, I admitted, the words bringing both relief and shame. I'm drowning. Then maybe it's time to save yourself, she said softly. Helping your mom doesn't have to mean destroying yourself. I knew she was right, but taking that step seemed impossible. What would people think? What would it say about me as a son? And despite everything, I did love my mother. I wanted her to be okay. The situation called for a reset, a chance to clear the air, rebuild understanding, and establish healthier patterns. Christmas was approaching. Perhaps the holiday spirit would soften hearts and open doors to reconciliation. With renewed determination, I began planning a Christmas dinner that would remind us both of happier times. I would invite Eliza, of course, but also Mom's close friends Nancy and William. Good food, warm company, festive atmosphere. Surely this could be the turning point we needed. This Christmas will be different, I promised myself as I created shopping lists and menu plans. Better. I had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. Christmas morning dawned crisp and clear, snow glistening on the front lawn like scattered diamonds. I woke early, excitement and nervous anticipation mingling in my stomach. Today would be different. Today would be the beginning of healing. I had spent weeks planning this dinner, selecting each dish with care. Traditional turkey with my grandmother's special stuffing recipe. Creamy mashed potatoes with roasted garlic. Fresh cranberry sauce made from scratch. Green bean casserole with those crispy onions Mom loved. Homemade rolls. 2 kinds of pie, pumpkin and apple. Because why choose when you could have both? The grocery bill had been eye-watering, especially the organic free-range turkey that cost nearly 4 times what a regular one would. But today was special. Today was worth it. "Merry Christmas, Mom," I said, bringing her coffee in bed, along with a small wrapped gift, a cashmere scarf in her favorite shade of blue. She seemed genuinely pleased, touching the soft fabric with appreciation. "It's beautiful, Paxton." "Thank you." This positive reaction bolstered my spirits. I spent the morning cooking while Christmas music played softly in the background. Mom sat at the kitchen table, sharing stories from Christmases past, even laughing at memories involving Dad without the usual tears. Around 3 in the afternoon, Eliza arrived with a bouquet of poinsettias and a homemade chocolate cake. She had dressed carefully in a conservative sweater and slacks, nothing that could possibly trigger criticism. I squeezed her hand in silent gratitude. Nancy arrived next, her booming laugh filling the entryway as she stomped snow from her boots. A retired librarian and my mother's friend for 20 years, she brought a bottle of sparkling cider and a warmth that instantly lifted the atmosphere. William, a widower from Mom's church group, completed our small gathering. Soft-spoken and kind, he had lost his wife around the same time Dad died, creating a natural bond with my mother. The table looked beautiful, if I do say so myself. Real cloth napkins folded into swans, thanks to a YouTube tutorial. The good china that normally stayed locked in the cabinet. Candles casting a golden glow over everything. A small Christmas tree decorated with ornaments from my childhood centered the table. "This looks wonderful," Nancy exclaimed, patting my shoulder. "Diana, your son has outdone himself." Mom nodded, seeming genuinely impressed. "He can be very thoughtful when he wants to be." The qualifier stung slightly, but I brushed it aside. Today was about new beginnings, not old hurts. Dinner began smoothly. The food turned out perfectly. Conversation flowed naturally. Mom seemed relaxed, even accepting a second helping of stuffing when I offered it. William complimented the turkey. Eliza and Nancy discussed hospital volunteer opportunities. It felt normal, pleasant, hopeful. Then, somewhere between the main course and dessert, the shift began. "Paxton was such a fussy eater as a child," Mom said suddenly. "Once he threw a tantrum so severe over broccoli that he knocked over an entire pitcher of milk." I laughed lightly. "I was 5, if I recall." "You were 9, Mom corrected, though I knew with certainty I wasn't. Always dramatic. His teachers were constantly calling about his behavior problems. This was categorically untrue. I had been a quiet, studious child with an exemplary school record. "I don't remember any calls from teachers," I said carefully. "You wouldn't," she replied with a knowing look to the others. "Selective memory." Before I could respond, she launched into another story. "Did I ever tell you about the time Paxton ran away? 11 years old, packed a little suitcase with underwear and comic books. His father found him hiding in the Wilsons' garden shed. This had never happened. Not even close." Eliza shot me a confused look. William and Nancy seemed uncomfortable, but unsure how to respond. "Mom, I never ran away," I said quietly. "There's that selective memory again," she laughed, patting my hand condescendingly. "He was always making up stories as a child, too. His imagination was something else." The irony was not lost on me. As she continued fabricating incidents from my childhood, each painting me as difficult, dramatic, or dishonest, I felt a familiar tightness in my chest. Eliza, sensing my distress, attempted to redirect the conversation. The turkey is absolutely delicious, Paxton. What seasoning did you use in the rub? Before I could answer, Mom interjected. Oh, that's my recipe. I had to talk him through it step by step this morning. Left to his own devices, we'd be eating something from a box. Another lie. She hadn't set foot in the kitchen until the food was nearly done. Eliza tried again. Paxton mentioned you were a teacher, Diana. What grade did you teach? Fourth grade, Mom answered, then immediately pivoted. Speaking of teaching, did Paxton ever tell you about the time he cheated on his algebra final? His father and I were so embarrassed when the principal called. My fork clattered against my plate. This fabrication crossed a line. Not only had I never cheated, but I had graduated with honors in mathematics. That never happened, I stated firmly. Mom's expression hardened, her eyes narrowing slightly. Don't contradict me, Paxton. Just because you don't remember doesn't mean it didn't happen. The atmosphere grew tense. Nancy attempted a diversion by complimenting the table decorations. William mentioned something about church services. But Mom was on a mission now, sharing increasingly outlandish stories about my supposed misdeeds. With each tale, my heart sank further. This was not the reconciliation I had hoped for. This was character assassination disguised as reminiscence. When I rose to bring out the pies, Mom's hand on my arm stopped me. You're not going to serve dessert yet? We've barely finished the turkey, always rushing. No patience, this one. I was just checking if they were ready, I explained, though in truth I needed a moment away from the table. In the kitchen, I gripped the counter edge, taking deep breaths. Eliza followed, concern etched on her face. Are you okay? She whispered. No, I admitted. I don't know why she's doing this. Eliza squeezed my hand. We can leave if you want. It's Christmas, I said helplessly, and I spent all day cooking. That doesn't mean you have to endure this. But I returned to the table, determined to salvage something from this disaster. I served pie with forced cheer, complimenting Nancy's stories about her grandchildren, asking William about his recent trip to visit his sister in Florida. For a moment, normalcy seemed to return. The pie was enjoyed. Coffee was poured. Perhaps the worst had passed. Then Mom set down her fork, looked directly at me, and declared loudly enough to silence all other conversation, "It's time for you to move out." The room went completely still. Even the Christmas music in the background seemed to pause. What? I managed, certain I had misheard. You heard me. It's time for you to find your own place. I need my space back. She took another bite of turkey, chewing slowly as though she hadn't just detonated a bomb at the dinner table. Mom, this isn't the time. When is the time, Paxton? You've been controlling my life for years now. I can't breathe with you constantly hovering. William stared at his plate. Nancy's mouth hung slightly open. Eliza reached under the table to squeeze my knee in support. I cover the rent, the bills, and the food, I reminded her, struggling to keep my voice steady. I moved back to help you after Dad died. There you go, throwing money in my face again, she snapped. As if that gives you the right to dictate everything. And don't pretend you moved back for me. You had nowhere else to go after you lost your apartment. Another complete fabrication. I had given up a promotion and relocation package to stay and care for her. That's not what happened, and you know it, I said quietly. See how he talks to me? Mom addressed our guests directly now. This is what I deal with every day. Controlling, manipulative, just like his father. The comparison to Dad, usually held up as saintly being twisted into an insult, was the final straw. I think, Eliza said carefully, this might be a conversation for another time. Of course you take his side, Mom retorted. You two are probably plotting to put me in a home so you can have this house to yourselves. Diana. Nancy interjected gently. Paxton has been very supportive. I've seen how much he does for you. You don't know what goes on behind closed doors, Mom replied darkly. The threats, the control, taking my medication away when I don't do what he wants. The blatant lie stunned me into silence. William shifted uncomfortably, clearly wishing to be anywhere else. Nancy looked confused, glancing between us as if trying to reconcile the son she knew with this monstrous portrait. I think, William finally said, rising slowly, that I should be going. Thank you for dinner, Paxton. Diana, I'll see you at church. Nancy followed suit, making awkward excuses about needing to call her daughter. Within minutes, they were gone, leaving behind half-eaten pie and an atmosphere thick with tension. "Well," Mom said, gathering her plates as if nothing unusual had occurred. "That was lovely, but I'm tired now. Eliza, will you be leaving soon too?" The dismissal was clear. Eliza looked at me questioningly. "Actually," I said, finding my voice at last, "Eliza and I are going to clean up in the kitchen." "You should rest, Mom." Surprisingly, she accepted this suggestion, retreating to her bedroom without further comment. In the silent kitchen, Eliza helped me load the dishwasher, neither of us speaking until we were certain Mom was out of earshot. "Paxton," she said finally, "what just happened?" I shook my head, words failing me. The beautiful dinner I had planned, the reconciliation I had hoped for, the holiday spirit I had tried to create, all lay in ruins around us like the scattered remnants of Christmas crackers. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I can't keep doing this." As we finished cleaning in silence, one thought crystallized in my mind with perfect clarity. Something had to change. And for once, it wouldn't be me accommodating her demands. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake in my childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling where glow-in-the-dark stars I had placed 20 years ago still faintly illuminated the darkness. Each one represented a dream I once had: college, career, travel, family of my own. Dreams that had been indefinitely postponed when I moved back home. The events of the dinner replayed in my mind on continuous loop. The fabricated stories, the public humiliation, the demand that I leave ironic, considering I was the one paying for the house. Most disturbing were the false accusations of threats and medication withholding, allegations that could have serious consequences if believed. By dawn, clarity emerged through exhaustion. What I was experiencing wasn't just difficult family dynamics, it was emotional abuse. The realization hit me with the force of physical pain. I had been making excuses, normalizing behavior that was profoundly unhealthy, sacrificing my well-being on the altar of filial obligation. When morning light filtered through my curtains, I reached for my phone and texted two people, Marcus and Eliza. "Need to talk. Coffee at Pearl Street Cafe? 8 a.m.? Both responded immediately with affirmatives. I slipped out quietly, leaving a note saying I was meeting friends for breakfast. Mom was still asleep, exhausted perhaps from the emotional theater of the previous evening. Pearl Street Cafe buzzed with post-Christmas morning energy. Holiday music played softly. The scent of cinnamon and coffee created an atmosphere of comfort at odds with my internal turmoil. Marcus arrived first, concern evident in his face. "You look like hell, man." "Feel like it too," I admitted. Eliza joined moments later, sliding into the booth beside me, her hand finding mine beneath the table. Over steaming mugs, I recounted not just the Christmas dinner disaster, but the entire pattern of behavior, the criticisms, the lies to family and neighbors, the accidents involving my possessions, the financial situation. "She's gaslighting you," Marcus said bluntly when I finished, "making you question your own reality. Classic emotional manipulation." "My mother works with abused women," Eliza added gently. "What you're describing fits the pattern of emotional abuse. The isolation from support networks. The financial control except in reverse, with you providing everything while being made to feel inadequate." "But she's my mother," I said helplessly. "And she's been through so much with Dad dying." "Grief doesn't justify abuse," Marcus countered. "And you're not helping her by enabling this behavior." "What about her health issues?" I asked. "Her medication? Doctor's appointments?" "There are services," Eliza said. "Home health aides, medication management systems, transportation for seniors. You can support her without living together." "She'd never accept that." "That's not your problem," Marcus said firmly. "Your mental health matters too, Paxton." We talked for nearly 2 hours, exploring options, consequences, scenarios. By the time we parted, I had the outline of a plan, one that terrified me, but also offered the first glimmer of hope I'd felt in months. Back at the house, Mom sat at the kitchen table, pointedly checking her watch. "Nice of you to finally come home. I've been waiting for my breakfast." The old Paxton would have apologized, rushed to make her food, accepted the guilt trip. The new Paxton, born in the crucible of Christmas dinner, simply said, "I ate at the cafe. There's cereal in the pantry." Her surprised expression, almost made me laugh. For the next 48 hours, I operated with laser focus. First, I searched online for apartments, finding a one-bedroom unit available immediately in a complex just 20 minutes away, close enough to check on Mom regularly, but far enough for genuine separation. Next, I researched home healthcare options, discovering a service that provided daily check-ins, medication management, light housekeeping, and transportation to appointments. The cost was significant but manageable given what I'd save by not covering the entire household expenses. I contacted a financial advisor to reorganize my budget, ensuring I could maintain support for Mom's essential needs while reclaiming financial independence. I would still help with major expenses and emergencies, but day-to-day costs would need adjusting to reflect a more balanced arrangement. Most importantly, I called Adult Protective Services for guidance, explaining the situation and ensuring my plan wouldn't be considered abandonment. The caseworker, Sandra, was reassuring. Supporting a parent doesn't mean sacrificing your entire life, she said. Establishing healthy boundaries is important for both of you. She provided additional resources, including information about support groups for caregivers and family counseling services specialized in elder relationships. Throughout these preparations, Mom remained oblivious, perhaps assuming our Christmas confrontation would blow over like previous conflicts. She continued with passive-aggressive comments and small manipulations, each one strengthening my resolve rather than weakening it. On the morning of December 27th, 2 days after Christmas, I signed a 6-month lease on the apartment. That afternoon, I arranged for healthcare services to begin the following week. By evening, I had packed essential belongings into my car while Mom napped. The final step was the hardest: writing the letter. I sat at my desk, struggling to find words that were honest without being cruel, firm without being cold. After several drafts, I produced this. Mom, I love you, but our current living arrangement isn't healthy for either of us. As you suggested at Christmas dinner, I'm moving out. I've found an apartment and will be staying there starting today. I've arranged for a home health service to assist with your medications, housekeeping, and transportation to appointments. They'll begin on Monday. The information is on the refrigerator, along with their contact number. I will continue to help financially with your essential needs, but I can no longer cover all household expenses. We can discuss a fair arrangement when things have calmed down. This isn't abandonment. It's an attempt to build a healthier relationship between us. I'll call you in a few days when we've both had time to process this change. Love, Paxton. I placed the letter on the kitchen table, alongside the business card for the healthcare service and Sandra's contact information at Adult Protective Services. Then, while Mom still slept, I loaded the last of my packed belongings and quietly closed the door behind me. Driving away from the house felt both terrifying and liberating. My phone began ringing before I reached the end of the street, Mom, discovering my absence sooner than expected. I silenced it, knowing any conversation now would devolve into emotional manipulation. At the apartment, sparse and impersonal with its beige walls and generic furniture, I sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed myself to cry for the relationship I wished we had, for the mother who couldn't see past her own pain, and for the son who had tried so hard to make things right. But beneath the grief ran a current of something unfamiliar. Relief. For the first time in 3 years, I could breathe without the weight of constant criticism and impossible expectations. Whatever came next would be difficult, but at least now there was possibility for change. As predicted, my phone exploded with messages. Mom, alternating between rage and tearful pleas. Aunt Laura, accusing me of abandonment. Cousin Samantha, expressing disappointment. Even Mr. Harold from across the street, somehow already informed of my desertion. I responded to none of them. This night, at least, was for me to begin the process of reclaiming my life and rebuilding my sense of self after years of systematic erosion. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, difficult conversations, perhaps even greater conflict. But tonight, in the quiet of my new space, I allowed myself to acknowledge a simple truth. Sometimes the bravest, most loving thing you can do both for yourself and others is to walk away. The first week, in my new apartment, passed in a blur of contradictory emotions: freedom and guilt, relief and anxiety, determination and doubt. I established a daily routine that had nothing to do with caregiving. Work, exercise, cooking simple meals for one, exploring the neighborhood. Meanwhile, my phone continued its assault of notifications. Mom called hourly the first day, then every 2 hours, then sporadically as her strategy shifted. Voicemails ranged from hysterical, "How could you abandon me? I'm going to die alone," to manipulative, "The neighbors are so concerned. Everyone's talking about what kind of son leaves his mother," to threatening, "I've called a lawyer about elder abuse." End of quote. I listened to each message, noting the emotional tactics, but not responding. The home healthcare service confirmed they had made contact and established services despite initial resistance. That was enough for now. On the fourth day, a text from an unknown number arrived. "This is Jessica from Sunrise Home Health. Your mother refused to let me administer medications this morning and said you're holding her hostage by controlling her care. Please advise." This required intervention. I called Jessica directly, explaining the situation and my mother's history of manipulation. Together, we developed a strategy. Jessica would continue visits at scheduled times, maintain professional boundaries regardless of provocations, and document all interactions. If Mom refused critical care, I would be notified immediately. "This isn't uncommon," Jessica assured me. "When family dynamics change, there's often a period of testing boundaries. Consistency is key." By week 2, Mom's approach evolved. The desperate calls decreased, replaced by calculated silence, punctuated by calls from flying monkeys, people she had enlisted to pressure me on her behalf. Aunt Laura left scathing voicemails about family loyalty. Uncle Robert texted Bible verses about honoring one's parents. Cousin Samantha sent screenshots of Mom's Facebook posts depicting herself as abandoned and destitute. These attacks hurt, especially from family members who hadn't bothered to hear my side. But with each manipulative attempt, my resolve strengthened. This was exactly the pattern that had kept me trapped for 3 years. Not everyone turned against me. Aunt Susan, Dad's sister, called with unexpected support. "Your father would be proud of you for standing up for yourself," she said. "Diana was always difficult. Richard buffered that for years." My cousin Michael reached out next. "Mom's been sharing Aunt Diana's posts, but something doesn't add up. Can we grab a beer and talk?" Over drinks, I shared the full story. Michael listened without judgment, then nodded slowly. "That tracks with what I remember from family gatherings. She always had Dad walking on eggshells." These allies were precious validation that I wasn't crazy, wasn't a terrible son, wasn't imagining the manipulation. Meanwhile, Eliza became my rock. She respected my need for space, but checked in daily, brought occasional meals, and never once suggested I should have stayed in an unhealthy situation. "You're sleeping better," she observed 3 weeks into my move. "Your eyes don't have those dark circles anymore." She was right. Physical symptoms of stress I hadn't even recognized. Persistent headaches, stomach issues, insomnia had begun to fade. I was remembering who I used to be before becoming consumed by caregiving and emotional survival. Around this time, I found a support group for adult children navigating difficult relationships with aging parents. The stories shared there were both heartbreaking and comforting. I wasn't alone in this struggle. Many described similar patterns of manipulation, guilt trips, and community mobilization against them. "The hardest part," said Thomas, a group member whose situation closely mirrored mine, "is accepting that you can't fix them. You can only fix your response." This wisdom became my mantra as I navigated the next phase. 1 month after moving out, I finally answered one of Mom's calls. I had prepared extensively with my therapist, another positive change prioritizing my mental health, establishing clear boundaries for the conversation and exit strategies if those boundaries were crossed. "Hello, Mom," I said, my heart racing despite the preparation. Finally, she replied, her voice simultaneously relieved and accusatory. "I thought you might be dead." "I've been receiving your messages," I said calmly. I needed time and space. What followed was predictable but still difficult tears, guilt trips, accusations of abandonment, claims of declining health. I listened without defending, then calmly restated my boundaries. "I'm still supporting you financially. You have healthcare assistance daily." I'm available by phone once a week for a conversation that remains respectful. If the conversation becomes manipulative or accusatory, I'll end the call. So I'm just supposed to accept whatever terms you dictate? She demanded. You're supposed to treat me with the same respect you'd give any adult. I'm your son, not your caretaker, emotional punching bag, or ATM. The call ended badly, with her hanging up after I refused to move back home. But a precedent had been established. I would maintain contact, but only within healthy parameters. 2 more difficult calls followed over subsequent weeks. During the third, something unexpected happened. After the usual recriminations, Mom's voice suddenly softened. Jessica mentioned you've been paying for extra physical therapy sessions, she said. Your arthritis seemed worse. I thought it might help. A long pause. Thank you. It wasn't an apology or acknowledgement of her behavior, but it was a moment of genuine gratitude without manipulation attached. Small shifts continued. Jessica reported that Mom had begun taking medications consistently and participating in recommended exercises. She had stopped telling neighbors I was withholding care. She even allowed Jessica to help organize Dad's clothes still hanging in the closet, something she had previously refused to consider. These changes didn't mean our relationship was suddenly healthy. Far from it. But they suggested that my boundaries were having the intended effect, forcing Mom to develop more independence, and perhaps glimpse how her behavior affected others. 2 months after moving out, I met Mom for coffee in a neutral location, a cafe halfway between our homes. I arrived anxiously, unsure what version of her I would encounter. She looked smaller somehow, older but also more put together than when I left. Her hair was freshly styled, her clothes neat. You look good, I said honestly. Jessica helped me find a salon that does home visits, she replied. The conversation remained superficial. The weather, a new store opening nearby, a television show she enjoyed, no mention of my abandonment or her fabricated struggles. It was stilted but civil, ending after 30 minutes with tentative plans to meet again the following month. As weeks became months, a new pattern gradually emerged. Weekly phone calls became less emotionally charged. Monthly coffee meetings grew less awkward. Mom even asked about Eliza occasionally, without immediately adding a criticism. Jessica reported continued improvement at home. She's following the medication schedule without reminders now. And she's joined a grief support group at the senior center. That's been good for her. This news brought both relief and a twinge of hurt. Mom had refused my suggestions of grief counseling for years, dismissing it as nonsense. But I reminded myself that the goal wasn't to win or receive credit, it was to help her heal and build a healthier relationship between us. 5 months after moving out, I received a text message that stopped me in my tracks. I miss you. I'm sorry for what I said at Christmas. Not a full acknowledgement of the broader pattern, not a complete apology for years of manipulation, but a start, a crack in the wall of denial that had seemed impenetrable. I showed the message to my therapist during our next session. This is promising, she said, but proceed carefully. True behavior change takes time and consistent effort. One apology doesn't erase the pattern. Wise advice that kept me from immediately rushing back into the old dynamic. Instead, I thanked Mom for her message and suggested we discuss it at our next coffee meeting. There, sitting across from each other with steam rising from ceramic mugs, we had our first genuinely honest conversation in years. I was afraid, she admitted. After your father died, everything felt out of control. Having you there, depending on you, it gave me something to hold on to. When you started having your own life with Eliza, I felt like I was losing everything again. I understand fear, I said carefully, but the way you expressed it was harmful. The lies about me to family and neighbors, the constant criticism, the manipulation. She didn't deny it, didn't deflect, just nodded slowly. Jessica says I have control issues. I almost laughed at the understatement, but held back. Yes, I'm working on it, she said, staring into her coffee. With a therapist, finally took your advice. Those words, took your advice, represented a seismic shift in our dynamic. An acknowledgement, however small, that I might actually know something worthwhile. As I drove home afterward, I realized something profound had changed not just in Mom, but in me. The desperate need for her approval had diminished. The automatic assumption of guilt when she was upset had faded. I had reclaimed my sense of self, separate from her expectations and manipulations. This wasn't a Hollywood ending with tearful reconciliation and instant healing. It was messier, more gradual, filled with setbacks and small victories. But it was real progress, the kind built on truth rather than accommodation, on mutual respect rather than emotional hostage-taking. 6 months after that fateful Christmas dinner, I renewed my apartment lease without hesitation. The boundary I had established wasn't just physical distance, it was emotional health. And that was something worth maintaining, not just for my sake, but for any hope of a genuine relationship with my mother going forward. On a sunny June afternoon, exactly 6 months after the Christmas dinner that changed everything, Mom and I met at Riverside Park. Neutral territory had become our norm, but this location, with its sprawling trees and views of the water, offered something more. Perspective. We sat on a bench overlooking the river, watching ducks navigate currents with seeming effortlessness. At 58, Mom looked different than she had at Christmas. Thinner, yes, but also softer somehow. The rigid anger that had characterized her features had given way to something more contemplative. Jessica tells me you've been joining activities. At the senior center, I said, breaking our comfortable silence. 3 times a week now, she nodded. Watercolor on Mondays, book club Wednesdays, and chair yoga Fridays. Chair yoga? I couldn't hide my surprise. For arthritis, she explained, it actually helps. Doctor says my inflammation markers are down. We discussed her new routines, the friends she was making, the books her club was reading, normal conversation, the kind that flows between adults who respect each other, still somewhat new territory for us. Then, without prompting, she turned to face me directly. I've been thinking a lot about Christmas, she said, and everything before that. I tensed slightly, unsure where this was heading. My therapist has this term, narcissistic tendencies. She spoke carefully, as if testing each word. She says when people experience loss, sometimes they become so focused on their own pain that they can't see anyone else's. They make everything about themselves. I remained silent, letting her continue. After your father died, I couldn't handle being alone, but instead of admitting that, I made you responsible for my happiness. When you couldn't fix everything because no one could, I punished you for it. The honesty stunned me. For years, I had longed for this acknowledgement, this validation, that I wasn't crazy or ungrateful or failing as a son. The things I said about you to the neighbors, to family, they weren't true. I was angry that you had a life outside of caring for me. I wanted you to feel as trapped as I felt without your father. Her eyes filled with tears. But these weren't the manipulative tears I'd grown accustomed to, the kind strategically deployed to end conversations or deflect accountability. These seemed genuine. I'm not saying this to make you move back, she added quickly. I understand now that wasn't healthy for either of us. I just needed you to know that I see it now. What I did. How unfair it was. The knot in my chest, one I hadn't realized was still there, began to loosen. Thank you for saying that, I managed. It means a lot. We sat quietly again, watching a family feed ducks, despite the posted signs asking visitors not to. Some lessons are harder to learn than others. How's the new project going? Mom asked eventually, referring to a major software development contract I'd recently secured, one that would have been impossible to manage while living with her. Challenging but good, I replied. The client just approved our initial design. We start building next week. That's wonderful. No sarcasm. No passive-aggressive undertone, just simple support. And Eliza? She asked. You two still seeing each other? We are. Actually, we're talking about moving in together when my lease ends in September. I braced for criticism or guilt, an old habit still not fully broken, but it didn't come. She's good for you, Mom said instead. I wasn't fair to her either. Another acknowledgement that left me momentarily speechless. As the afternoon progressed, our conversation meandered through various topics, some significant, others trivial. We discussed her health, my work, memories of Dad, even politics, carefully. Throughout, a new dynamic emerged. 2 adults with separate lives, connected by family bonds, but not enmeshed in unhealthy dependence. Before leaving, Mom handed me a small envelope. What's this? I asked. Just open it later, she said with uncharacteristic shyness. At home that evening, I found a simple card inside. The message, written in her neat handwriting, read, "I'm proud of the boundaries you set. Your father would be too. Love, Mom." Those words particularly, "I'm proud," and boundaries represented a transformation I had never thought possible. The mother who had once punished any attempt at independence now acknowledged its necessity. This wasn't the end of our journey, of course. In subsequent months, old patterns occasionally resurfaced. Sometimes Mom still slipped into victim mode when stressed. Sometimes I still experienced reflexive guilt when asserting my needs. Recovery isn't linear, as my therapist often reminded me. But each time the old dynamic threatened to reassert itself, we now had tools to recognize and redirect. Mom would catch herself mid-guilt trip and pivot to more direct communication. I would name manipulative tactics when I noticed them, without anger but with clarity. Slowly, steadily, we were building something new. By Christmas of the following year, our first holiday gathering since the disastrous dinner we had established a different arrangement. I hosted at my apartment, now shared with Eliza. Mom came as a guest, bringing her signature apple pie and none of the previous year's emotional baggage. We were joined by Marcus, Eliza's sister Rachel, and even Aunt Susan, a small group bound not by obligation, but by genuine affection. The contrast could not have been more profound. Where tension had once suffocated, laughter now flowed freely. Where criticism had dominated, appreciation took center stage. Where fabricated stories once humiliated, authentic sharing now connected. Looking around the table at these faces, most importantly at my mother's, relaxed and engaged in conversation with Eliza about hospital volunteer opportunities, I realized the profound truth that had emerged from our painful journey. Sometimes, the greatest act of love is creating distance. Sometimes the people who claim they need us most actually need us to step back so they can find their own strength. Sometimes the most difficult boundaries to establish are the ones that ultimately heal. In setting limits with my mother, I hadn't abandoned her as she initially claimed. Rather, I had refused to continue a dynamic that was harming both of us. By walking away from toxicity, I created space for genuine connection to eventually grow. This doesn't mean estrangement is always the answer to family conflict. It doesn't mean all difficult relationships can transform with time and boundaries. But it does mean that enabling unhealthy dynamics out of guilt or obligation serves no one in the end. The most valuable lesson I learned through this painful chapter wasn't about my mother at all. It was about myself. About recognizing my worth beyond what I could provide for others. About understanding that love doesn't require martyrdom. About accepting that sometimes the hardest choice and the right choice are exactly the same. If you're struggling with similar family dynamics, know that you're not alone. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for authentic relationships. Have you ever had to create distance to save a relationship? Share your experience in the comments below. Your story might help someone else find the courage to make difficult but necessary changes. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button if this resonated with you. Remember, sometimes the bravest thing we can do is walk away, not in anger, but in love. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your well-being matters too.